Well, we're going to continue our celebration of World Read Aloud Day. And with me, I have a special guest, Joyce Brinkman, who is the Executive Director of Brick Street Poetry, Inc. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this interview.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
And I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about how I met Joyce. Somewhere, and I can't remember where, I saw this application to submit a poem, and there was like different topics like animals, bees, birds. It was like, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to submit. I didn't know what was going to happen, and then I heard from Joyce, and she said, I want to include your book in this anthology. And through that, that's how we connected, and that's how I learned about Brick Street Poetry Incorporated. And with World Read Aloud Day, it's important to celebrate all types of literature, all genres of writing, whether that's poetry, short story, nonfiction, fiction, fantasy, graphic novels. And so it was really important to me to make sure that we had poetry included. So Joyce, can you tell us a little bit about how Brick Street Poetry came to be a thing?
Well, we're over a dozen years old, actually. And it happened, I was fortunate to be named as the first Poet Laureate officially for the state of Indiana. And one of the things, there was a group of poetry, a group poetry reading that was happening on the south side of town. And I thought it would be good to have something on the north side of town where poets could come together and read their stuff. And as a result of that, we started the, I didn't want to be the front person on it. And I basically recruited Barry Harris, who at that time was in charge of the Tipton Poetry Journal and publishing the Tipton Poetry Journal, and Susan Miller, who worked for the Indianapolis Star, wrote for Indianapolis Star and other newspapers, freelance writing. And they came together and we started, Barry knew a lot of the poets and was able to bring poets in to do readings. And Susan actually was the host of our reading series, which we started, which was Poetry on Brick Street. Our very first guest reader that we had was from Mexico, Flor Aguilera Garcia. And so it all went very well. It grew very slowly. We started out with a very few people, and we closed down lots of restaurants because we usually met in a restaurant for our readings, but then that restaurant would close and we'd have to move to another one. But we grew as we went along, and now we always have our reading series at the Sullivan Muntz Cultural Center in Zionsville. Barry Harris got the idea that maybe we should become a 501c3. And so we got together. We also had the poet J.L. Cotto, who got involved with us. And actually Susan and Barry and J.L. and myself decided that we would apply for not-for-profit status and basically take in with the reading series, the publication of the Tipton Poetry Journal. So that's kind of how we began. And before we had our 501c3, we were very fortunate that we got help from Indiana Humanities to be our fiscal sponsor. So when we could apply for grants before we had the 501c3, they served as our fiscal sponsor, which was really very helpful for us to get started. And then over the years, it has just continued to grow. Our reading series has grown. We also instituted the Poetry Alive program, which is the umbrella in which we do children's poetry. Because of the pandemic, we instituted our podcast, which is called Off the Bricks. So we have various and sundry programs that basically we see ourselves as a service organization, if you will. We service poets. We try to help them with their careers. We try to get to know them, and we try to give them opportunities to do things and to grow in their careers. And at the same time, we are also serving the poetry loving community, and actually worldwide, because with our with some of our with our poetry journal and our anthologies that we now publish, as well as our podcast, we actually have a worldwide audience for the things that we do. So it's been a wonderful experience, and excited to be part of really poetry, really being on the stage, if you will, of cultural and art activities that are happening in the city.
Well, that is
And
great.
as I said, elsewhere in the world. I mean, for it to come out of here and to go out, to poetry lovers everywhere.
Well, I love that, something that started in Indiana has now this global footprint. Um, and speaking about the anthology, so the anthology that I ended up being in was this one, Words and Other Wild Things. Can you tell us a little bit about this anthology? Because this anthology went to a lot of special children. So you can tell us about maybe how you guys came up with the idea for this anthology, and then how, because you say you're a service organization, because this did fill a need. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, poetry was very important to me in my childhood. And I also think there's no better thing that a parent can do with a child than to read to a child and with a child. So I was very fortunate to have that in my life. And we would like every child really to have the opportunity for that. And we started out with, again, developing the Poetry Alive program. And we created this anthology, and the idea was to use it with costumed characters and to make visits to hospitals. So when we put out the call, which you saw and responded to, we put some characters in there that we happen to have costumes for, to try to get some poems that would go along with costumes that we thought we would be able to use in the hospitals to kind of catch the kids' imagination and have that costume character there to kind of get them excited, and then have poets come along and read to them there in the hospital, and also leave them books. Now, it has grown beyond hospital visits because we have done workshops in state parks where we've given away the books. We have done them in different for different organizations where we've given away the books. We've sent free books to Boys and Girls Clubs, homes for children, just various and sundry, organizations who are trying to make the world better for young people. And we also had some thespians from Pike Township High School in Indianapolis who actually acted out some of the poems dressed in costume, and did some recordings of these poems also. So we've done quite a bit with it. We still are giving the books away. We just gave books away right around Christmas time to Shalom House in Lebanon. So we still are utilizing this book and giving it to children. We also have a new book that we have recently published, and this book is called What I See I Can Be, and it's written, it's stories in verse. It's written by 7 poets, and the idea here is, some kids probably, if they've had an experience with a lawyer, it's not been a very good thing. And there are a lot of occupations out there that people might be able to get prepared to if they had some kind of realistic idea what those occupations were about. Sometimes all we know about an occupation is something we see on TV, or and so we wanted to kind of start young people thinking about, okay, there's so much out there in the world that can be done, but what do I need? How do I need to be prepared? And what's the realistic view of that occupation? So we have, I have had these 7 poets write about different occupations. And then we also had an artist who has created the title page for each of these poems, these stories in verse that are in the book. And on those title pages, the artist has portrayed a variety, a diverse group of people who are wanting to undertake these jobs or thinking about these jobs. For instance, one of those titles has a Native American girl who is in a wheelchair. So, we want to display the message that your race, ethnicity, or possibly, your physical condition doesn't mean that there isn't a place out there and something that you can do. And we want young people to have the opportunity to explore those possibilities. And again, in the book, we're also encouraging parents to certainly read to their kids before they can even read the book, just to expose them to that and to spend that time with them, and make them know that they are supportive of their kids in what their dreams are.
Well, I absolutely love that book that you made for kids, because I think a lot of times that's one of the things that after you get done with school, you're supposed to go get a job. And sometimes we don't do enough exposure for kids to occupation, what jobs are. So I think that's really, really important. But because this is World Read Aloud Day, we would love to hear you read, because you are included in this anthology.
I am, and I'm going to read one of my poems in this book. It's one that I kind of like. I like a lot. So I'm going to read this and share this. It's called "If I Were a Moose," and then I'll talk a little bit about it too, if that's all right.
That's all right.
Okay, it's called "If I Were a Moose." If I were a moose, I'd broker a truce between bees and bears, 'cause everyone cares that they live in peace, coexisting at least without constant fights of dive bombing flights that anger the bears, making honeycomb tears to capture the prize. I think it's quite wise to ask all the bees if they will just please offer the bears a bit of their wares. The bees, for their part, can give peace a start by leading the bees to orange blossom trees, where they can partake of a fare that tastes great. When having their fill, this act will instill the motive to share. If I would just dare to broker a truce, if I were a moose. So kind of the two messages, I think, in my poem here, the two messages I intended in the poem here was about sharing, and the importance of sharing, and what sharing can bring about, and how everybody can, you can work out a situation where there can be sharing, and everybody can benefit. And so that degree of cooperation is tremendously important in our world. And I think it's an important lesson for children. And then the other lesson here is, I start out saying, if I were a moose, and I end up saying, well, I should do this if I were a moose. And the message around that is, well, if I were, okay, I don't have to be a moose, do I? I mean, the idea is, it's easy to say, well, let somebody else do it. If I had this talent, or if I were this way, I could do this. I could help out in a situation, and I encourage people to share, and I could maybe bring people together. I could step forward and make a difference. And so the idea is, I think, you just can't fall back on, if I had this talent. You've got to say, okay, I'm capable too, and I can find ways to help bring about situations where everybody is going to have an opportunity to gain. I shouldn't step back when I see a situation where I think I can be of benefit. I need to step forward. So those are kind of the two messages that I was hoping to convey with that poem.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because many times, as students who are watching this will know that you get to read something, but then you have to analyze. So it's so nice to hear a poet read a poem and then get the poet's viewpoint on the intended message. So I think that's a just an awesome experience for students. And I guess wrapping up, could you tell us a little bit about your screensaver behind you? Like, what's going on with that?
Well, this has to do with the anthology that we are publishing first here on Earth, probably this next week. It's going to get published. And we basically have, the title of this is the Polaris Trilogy, Poems for the Moon. And we put out a call to the whole world, actually. And we have about over 150 poets from all the continents of Earth in most all the major languages, because the poets sent their poems in their native language. And these poems are going to be put on a microfiche that will be protected from the moon's radiation. And it's going to be launched on a NASA rocket and be part of what's called the Lunar Codex on the moon. And it will be there and readable for millions and millions of years. And I am so excited about this because, I think where technology and science is going, it is wonderful that art and culture are going along, because art and culture are such an important part of humanity. And for science and technology to move forward, for humanity to really be well represented, I think our world's culture and artistic ability needs to be there too. So I'm so happy that we are able to represent all these wonderful languages that we have in the book, and the beautiful words of these poets, as I said, from every continent on Earth. It's just a terribly exciting thing. And the image in the back is on the back of the book. You cannot see there are actually three separate launches. The Peregrine, no, over here, Peregrine, the Peregrine and Nova. We actually have a poem that we published for the bicentennial that's going to go up on the Nova mission. But the anthology will go to the moon on the Polaris mission. That's why the name of the book is Polaris. And it is behind me here down at the bottom. It's at the south pole of the moon. So you can't really see it here, even though Polaris is the north star for Earth. The mission that is named for Polaris is going to the south pole of the moon, where it again will be part of the Lunar Codex and be there on this remarkable NASA process of having it on microfiche and having it be lasting. As long as we don't have a big asteroid wipe out our moon, which would certainly break my heart because I am such a lover of the moon. So yeah, we want to pray for our moon because we want to keep it. It's such a a beautiful thing in our sky. Yeah.
Well, I think the moon, I think what I love about the moon is that like the sun brightens a bright day, but the moon is light in darkness. And so that's the thing I love about the moon, that you have this light that kind of shines down in the dark night. So
It does
yeah.
beautifully.
Well, Joyce, thank you so much for participating in World Real Loud Day. I'm sure that teachers, students, parents will want to know more. So where could people go to learn more about Brick Street Poetry Inc.?
Okay, well, we do have a website, which is brickstreetpoetry.org. We also have a Facebook page, which is our Facebook page has the title of Poetry on Brick Street, because it is where we started out advertising our reading series that this all grew from. But actually, if you just Google Brick Street Poetry, the Facebook page and the website brickstreetpoetry.org will come up. You know, we're also from time to time, not as often, but on Twitter or Instagram or those kinds of things. Now we also have our poetry podcasts, which is called Off the Bricks, and those are very educational because we interview. We have a guest poet, and we're normally we may be talking about, for instance, poetry of place, or the sonnet, or we'll be talking about a certain poetry form, or we're talking about the career of a poet, how kind of that developed. Another thing about poetry is that it's so good at addressing anything. We have done shows on mental health. We've done shows on drug addiction, where a poet who has had problems in the family coming from drug addiction has dealt with this through poetry. So there are lots of different themes, and you can find it on our Facebook page. You can find the link for the Spotify, which is one of the podcast platforms, but it's also on Apple Podcasts. So there are lots of platforms out there that it's on, and you can find those platforms on the if you go to our website and find the podcasts, and Spotify is free, so you can download a free and listen to any of the podcasts. We always post one the third Thursday of the month on our Facebook page, a new one. But you can go back and listen to any of the ones that we have on there, and some of them are just terribly interesting and educational.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll hope to keep up with you. Like you said, just you can Google and pull up the podcast, the Facebook page, and the website. And just thanks very much for spending some time with us and reading your poetry as part of World Real Loud Day.
Thank you.